when it comes to something like communication, it kind of seems obvious. I mean, it's more of, I know what I'm going to say, and therefore I'm just going to say it, right? Wrong. See, most things just come down to perception. I'm talking about things like convincing a client to buy a product, someone to go out with you, something, or even advancing a career. Speaking of careers, in most careers, progress will depend on your ability to demonstrate leadership skills, basically move people from a known to the known, solve problems, and above all, be able to communicate. When talking about communication, right? Speaking of communication, by the time you're done with this video, okay, you should be in a position to understand the meaning of communication, the role of communication in an organization, elements of communication, and the communication process. Let me just point out that there are summarized notes that go with this video, which you can access in my website, therightnetwork.com/communication skills. So just check them out. You can use them as part of your revision. Anyway, the link is in the video description. In that page, you can also look at other videos relating to this topic or other topics, and you can also access questions based on the topics. Okay. So for instance, this topic, there are going to be some summary questions there to guide you if you're doing these for exam purposes. Now, what is communication? You probably look at communication as a way of passing information from one person to the other. And yeah, sure, there is nothing wrong with that, except the question becomes, why do you do it? Why do you pass information from one person to the other? I mean, what do you desire from them? What do you want them to do? You could look at communication in a number of ways. Okay, when I'm talking about communication, we could communicate because you want to pass information. For instance, this is a car. There is a chick. I'm Moses Manuel. None of which has anything to do with, making your life more easy, right? So it's just information. You're just passing information, and that's pretty much it. Now, you could also communicate because, number two, we want to evoke some feelings. For instance, that is a beautiful car. Or, that is a nice house. Okay? So, you probably want the person to feel something about the car. You want the person to feel something about the house. And a third reason why you communicate, or a general reason why you communicate, is because you want to evoke an action. So if somebody says, this is a beautiful car, it depends on who the person is. If they are a salesperson, they're probably telling you that because they want you to buy that car. So they want you to undertake an action. They want you to do something. Okay? And yet, one message could have all those three. For instance, somebody says, well, I miss eating something, a cake. Now, why are they telling you that? Well, one, they're probably just telling you that because they want you to know, hence information. They're telling you that because they want you to feel something. Okay, poor you miss eating cakes. Or three, they're telling you that because they want you to do something. They want you to buy them the cake. And yet it's just the same message. Again, as I said, it sort of just comes down to perception. So communication is more than just passing information. Okay, there is a reason why you pass information. What is that reason? Communication is passing information from one party to another with an aim of creating understanding. So remember, they're not going to do anything with your message if they've not understood it. So understanding should be the key thing. When you're communicating, have they understood what you're trying to say? Because until they do that, then it's just, it's just noise that you've just, basically they're not going to do anything with it. It's an equivalent of listening to music and then saying, that is nice, that is a nice song. And then they ask you, what exactly is the artist saying? I don't know, but I love the beats. Okay? So that's pretty much how it looks like if you don't understand anything. I mean, well, music is complex, but you get the point, right? So passing information with an aim of creating understanding. From the definition of communication, we sort of see the following 4 points. Number one, the process of communication involves communication of ideas. That's the first one. Number two, the ideas should be replicated in the receiver's mind. And number three, the sender is ensured of accurate replication of the ideas by feedback. And above all, the purpose of communication is to elicit an action, to make somebody to do something. So you have that. You have the idea which you want to transmit into the other person's mind, and you want the idea to go into their mind the way it is in your mind. And the only way to know if that has happened is through their feedback. It's through their reaction to that message, which is what feedback is. Feedback is not what they've said. Feedback is how they've said it. Okay, it's more than just what they're saying. And that will guarantee you, or that will help you to know if they've understood your message or they haven't. it is worth noting that all communications have to be originated, produced, transmitted, received, and understood. Now, that brings us to the main elements or the main aspects of communication. So when somebody asks you what are the main elements of communication or what are the main aspects of communication, what are you going to tell them? Well, you could tell them the following. Okay, so number one, we have the source of communication. This is the sender. And you see, the sender can affect how you perceive the information, depending on a number of things. If they're not a credible source, it's like deciding to watch this video. I mean, it sort of just depends on whether or not you think the person talking to you actually has an idea of what they're talking about or not. I mean, that is how the sender can affect the information. But for communication to start, there must be a source, which could be a person, it could be a picture, it could be a thing, whatever. The point is, there has to be something that triggers the flow of that information, and that becomes the source of the information. Number two, the contents of communication. Okay, what exactly is it that you're communicating? Okay, so this becomes, the message. There is, number three, the process by which communication is produced. Was it written? Was it said? Okay. Number four, the method by which communication is transmitted. The channel is important. Okay. So emails, phone calls, posters, billboards, all that stuff. Okay. It sort of affects the communication. Later in upcoming videos, which is the reason why. Anyway, in our upcoming videos, we'll probably be talking about things like communication barriers, and you'll notice that the channel can actually work against the communication. So there is the channel, okay, and that is important. Next, the procedure involved in receiving communication, which actually depends on the channel that you've chose, right? I mean, you send an email and that's fun until you realize that person doesn't have internet or for one reason or the other, okay? And we have next, as a source of, as an aspect of communication, the destination of the communication, aka the receiver. So you can do everything perfectly on your side, but then the receiver, who are they? What do you know about them? What's their age? What is their educational background? What are some of their socioeconomic reality? How do they perceive the world? Most of those things can affect how our communication is perceived. I mean, you see these all the time on the internet where somebody is a good entrepreneur until they become rich and suddenly they are evil. I mean, all those things, okay? People just have their own way of perceiving information, and that is something you need to know before you start communicating. And finally, there is the feedback aspect of it, okay? The receiver's response to that information. So those are elements of communication that you need to know. So to sum it all up, just think sender, message, the method that you use, or the medium, the channel, okay? The receiver and the feedback when you're talking about aspects or elements of communication. So when defining communication, okay, when you take all those aspects and put them together, probably thinking, isn't that complicated? Not really. I mean, in order for communication to take place, it can be, the following must be there. There has to be someone who's willing to say something or to transmit something, right? So there is the sender, right? And then there is the message. First of all, there is someone else who's interested in what is being said. So there is someone who's saying something. There is someone who's interested in whatever is being said. And then there is the message, which must be partially or fully understood in order for it to qualify as communication. And finally, the receiver gives some sort of a response, aka a feedback. I mean, think of something as simple as saying hi, or as simple as shaking someone's hand, or a fist bump. All that stuff kind of just depends, right? I mean, if you're extending your hand to shake someone's hand and they have no idea what they're doing and they think that's a threat and they jump back, then that tells you something about the communication, right? You started a communication, they didn't understand what you're doing, and therefore there wasn't really much going on there. There's a barrier. But if they shake your hand back, it means they looked at what you're doing, they knew what you're doing, and therefore they responded. And so that is how simple communication can be, but it can also be very complex. Hence the reason why we have all these barriers and stuff, right? That is the thing about communication. Why is effective communication important in business? A rather summative way of describing what happens in the business. In all businesses have operations, right? There is what you're going to do. So you have service, your products, whatever, both, right? So there is that. And the operation aspect will depend on a number of things. First of all, it will depend on whether people actually know what you want them to do if you're the manager. Hence, the need for you to have some sort of effective communication in that organization. I'm talking about things like transmission of information from, say, the top management to the mid management to the first line supervisors to the workers. All that has to take place in order for operations to be effective, right? But then, if you are making something, or if you have a plan to make something, but you don't have the finances, and that hasn't been communicated, then you've just wasted your time planning for something that cannot be financed, right? Hence, again, the need for, communication, right? And finally, you have money, you know what you need to do, put them together, you do something, right? So you have goods, services, or both. Except the world doesn't know that you exist, which means your marketing sucks. So again, communication, right? You need to communicate your existence to the outside world, right? So that is the reason why at this point communication becomes properly important. Now, communication within an organization, in short, will help to fix problem in the following areas. We're talking about structure of the organization, delegation of duties, motivation in sales and marketing, okay, human resource management, and leadership styles. Let's look at how that takes place when you're talking about, stakeholders within an organization. So how does communication sort of help to smooth things with stakeholders in an organization? The obvious question is, who are stakeholders? For starters, a stakeholder is anybody who can be affected by what the organization does or can actually affect the organization, either by doing something or not doing something. So for instance, number one, your suppliers. Efficient communication will means effectiveness in supply, which also will lead to smooth production, the raw materials arriving in time, basically your inputs, process, output. That works if you have good communication with your suppliers, because they are your stakeholders. I mean, think about number two, another stakeholder, the customers. If you don't communicate with your customers in a better way, it means you're going to have a hard time figuring out what their problems are, and then you're going to be solving the wrong thing, and you expect them to pay for that, and then they won't pay, and then you incur loss, and then you say business is difficult. At this point, your communication is the problem. The point is, you need to communicate with those people, right? Another thing, number three, employees kind of make sense. These are stakeholders. How do you communicate with the employees? Remember, they're the ones who are building whatever it is that you're selling. And so there's a need for effective communication there. The general public, okay, the managers, all these people are stakeholders in the organization, and they need you to communicate effectively. Okay, so let's talk about the process of communication. I mean, it is cyclic, okay, aka the communication cycle. And communication just, for the most part, will start with you having an idea. And that idea is going to be stored in your mind through codes, okay, a code. And what do I mean by a code? I mean, you're thinking of many things and they're just not stored there in pictures and words and all that. I mean, the mind is complicated. So you think of a nice house. What does that mean to you? What is a nice house? Think of a nice car. Think of a beautiful person. I mean, all these things are complex, right? If you want to tell somebody that you saw a beautiful car, you have to encode that. You have to translate that from just what is in your mind into a message that they will understood. That is called encoding. Encoding is the process of converting or rather transforming information or raw data into a meaningful message. I saw a beautiful car could mean I saw a Lamborghini, I saw a Ferrari, I saw whatever it is that you saw, Toyota. And then you tell them that, right? I saw a beautiful Toyota. What kind of Toyota? I saw a beautiful Ferrari. Which kind of Ferrari? I mean, all that stuff, right? You have the message, but then you have to decide, is this message going to be written? Am I going to write it? Am I going to say it? Am I going to make a video? And so the choice, video, saying it, speaking it, would mean deciding on a channel. So am I going to say it via phone? Am I going to make a video and post it on YouTube or whatever? Am I going to write it as a blog post? You, the sender, have encoded information into a message, and so you've chosen to say it, which is the media, and now you have a medium, which is the channel. Now you're going to probably say it via phone, and that information is transmitted to the recipient, that is the receiver in this case. Remember, the information is encoded, which means the receiver has to decode, basically derive meaning out of that message. And that forms the basis of the understanding. It's your job to help the person understand your message. And therefore, you have to do the encoding properly. Just don't blah, 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 type something and then throw it out there. And now they are thinking, okay, what does this word mean? Do I have to consult a dictionary? You don't want to give them homework before they understand your message, right? The receiver derives meaning out of the message. And then based on the meaning they get, you want to know if they understood the message or not, hence the need for you to look at their feedback. What is feedback? Feedback simply refers to the receiver's reaction to the message. I mean, for the most part, you think it's response, but it's not, because response can be a fake one. So it's not just response, it's how they responded. Okay? They said okay. How did they say okay? They wrote something back. What is the tone? What are they not telling you? From the feedback, you'll know if the message was understood or not. Remember, understanding is never guaranteed in communication for many reasons. It depends on how they decode the message. It depends on how you encoded the message. Maybe the channel you used is the problem. All those things can turn out to be a barrier to communication. But that is the process of communication. Encode information into a message, okay? Choose a medium that suits how you want that information to be, written, verbal, audiovisual, non-verbal. Pick a channel, a mechanism to relay the message. The message is relayed to the receiver, who decodes it, basically tries to understand it, encodes a feedback, and you get the feedback, you decode the feedback, and it's just cyclic. The point is, communication is it starts as a small thing and then it grows into a big thing depending on how you two relate. So, you now know what communication is, the process of communication, the elements of communication, and benefits that a communication can have to the organization. If there is any question, do let me know, okay? I'm Moses, and I'll see you in the next video.